You mentioned color revolution. One of the things that I think that we could absolutely see again is go back to the first term. When the first impeachment of President Trump happened in 2019, it was regarding leaks from a phone call, believe it or not, with Ukraine and the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. So in that case, you had Alexander Vindman, who was an army officer. You had the CIA officer, Eric Charamella, that was detailed to President Trump's White House and the National Security Council. I've said that I think what they're trying to do is gin this up again. They're trying to get someone, probably at the very least, get someone to start leaking classified information, national security information, like, oh, I don't know, the current peace negotiations between the United States, Ukraine, and Russia, leak that out to try to gin up yet another impeachment of President Trump. And if the Democrats are able to be victorious in taking back the House, many people think that that's a possibility for 2026, then this will be something that they have on the shelf ready to go day one. I think there's a plot afoot. I absolutely think that it's a color revolution designed to overthrow the sitting commander-in-chief, the President of the United States.
Less than 24 hours after that aired late yesterday afternoon, early evening. This morning, Jack's prediction came true. We were greeted this morning with a leak of a classified phone call, or I would assume it was classified, a transcript of a phone call between Vladimir Putin's senior foreign policy advisor and Steve Witkoff, who is President Trump's special envoy. This was published by Bloomberg, and the readout of this phone call between Witkoff and Putin's senior foreign policy advisor is being presented in exactly the same way as that phone call between President Trump and Zelensky was presented all those years ago. But if before we even analyze it, I want to read you this transcript. Then I want to show you the reaction from the Trump haters and exactly how they're positioning this transcript. But that reaction has to be juxtaposed with you reading or hearing what exactly was said in this transcript. Otherwise, it might be too easy to assume that the way that the mainstream media is describing this transcript is accurate. We want to know exactly what was said. We don't want someone else to describe it to us. So here's what it was said. Steve Witkoff said, "Yuri, here's what I would do, my recommendation." Yuri says, "Yes, please." Witkoff said, "I would make the call and just reiterate that you congratulate the president," he's talking about President Trump, "on this achievement, that you supported it, that you respect, that he's a man of peace, and you're really glad to have seen it happen." So I would say that. I think from that, it's going to be a really good call. Because let me tell you what I told the president. I told the president that the Russian Federation has always wanted a peace deal. That's my belief. I told the president I believe that. And I believe the issue is that we have two nations that are having a hard time coming to a compromise. And when we do, we're going to have a peace deal. I'm even thinking that maybe we set out like a 20-point peace proposal, just like we did in Gaza. We put a 20-point Trump plan together that was just 20 points for peace. And I'm thinking maybe we do the same thing with you. My point is this. The Russian, Yuri, then says, okay, my friend, I think that very point our leaders could discuss. Hey, Steve, I agree with you that he will congratulate. He, and he's talking about Putin, of course, he will say that Mr. Trump is a real peace man and so. That he will say. Witkoff says, but here's what I think would be amazing. Yuri says, okay. Witkoff says, what if, hear me out. Yuri says, I will discuss that with my boss, and then I come back to you, okay? Witkoff says, yeah, because listen to what I'm saying. I just want you to say, maybe just say this to President Putin, because, I have the deepest respect for President Putin. Yuri says, yes. Witkoff says, maybe he says to President Trump, Steve and Yuri discussed a very similar 20-point plan to peace, and that could be something that we think might move the needle a little bit, open to these sort of things, to explore what it's going to take to get a peace deal done. Now, me to you, I know what it's going to take to get a peace deal done. Donetsk and maybe a land swap somewhere. But I'm saying instead of talking like that, let's talk more hopefully, because I think we're going to get a deal here. And I think, Yuri, the president will give me a lot of space and discretion to get to that deal. Yuri says, I see. Witkoff says, so if we can create the opportunity that after this, I talked to Yuri and we had a conversation, I think that this could lead to big stuff. Yuri says, okay, that sounds good. Sounds good. Witkoff says, and here's one more thing. Zelensky is coming to the White House on Friday. Yuri says, I know that, and chuckles. Witkoff says, I will go to that meeting because they want me there. But I think, if possible, we have the call with your boss before that Friday meeting. Yuri says, before, yeah? Witkoff says, correct. Yuri says, okay, I got your advice. So I discuss that with my boss and then I come back to you, okay? Witkoff says, okay, Yuri, I'll speak to you soon. Yuri says, great, thank you so much, thanks you. And Witkoff says, bye-bye. That is the entirety of the transcript. Now, the left and even some on the neocon right are framing this as some kind of great scandal. They're saying President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, has advised the Russian government, has given advice to Vladimir Putin on how to coerce Trump into agreeing to a certain peace plan. And I just want to say right now, you heard those words. There's nothing remotely scandalous about anything that was said in that call. The scandal, of course, is that this call was leaked to Bloomberg and that this was released publicly. That is a bad faith move by a bad actor. And we should figure out who leaked that to Bloomberg, because it will be detrimental to actually creating a peace deal, which honestly, a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, by the way, which is honestly probably the intent of whoever leaked it. Because the globalists, as you know, don't want an end to the war between Ukraine and Russia. And that's probably the motivation for leaking that call. But this idea that Steve Witkoff was advising Vladimir Putin on how to coerce Trump is just the stupidest take that I've ever heard. The absolute stupidest. President Trump is not only a good negotiator, he's a good negotiator because he negotiates at a very high level, but he uses very basic negotiation techniques and tactics. One of the most effective negotiation tactics when you have something that you want the other party to agree to is to make the other party think that your idea is their idea. That is what you're seeing play out with Steve Witkoff. And anybody who has any knowledge of even the basic level of negotiation recognizes that instantly. Steve Witkoff, obviously not of his own volition, this is something that was most likely highly strategized behind the scene, wants to propose a 20-point peace plan between Russia and Ukraine. But he needs it to be, he needs the Russians to believe that it was their idea, not just something that they agreed to. And so he's presenting this idea to Putin's foreign policy advisor to present to Putin, for Putin to present to Trump so that Putin feels that it's his idea. That's it. That's the analysis. It's not scandalous. Imagine thinking that it's scandalous to want peace and to make an effort to procure peace. That's what the left. It's not just the left, by the way. Adam Kinzinger, former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, reposted this transcript, and this repost of this transcript, this comment from Adam Kinzinger, has 750,000 views on X, and he goes, "This is absolutely traitorous behavior." Absolutely traitorous behavior. Oh, are you talking about leaking such a call? Is that the traitorous behavior that you're talking about? Are you interested in the traitor that engaged in that behavior? No, you're not. Of course he's not. He's doing exactly what they did. It's the same playbook that they leveraged against President Trump during President Trump's first term, where they took that call, that readout of that phone call between President Trump and Vladimir Zelensky. And even though the readout of the phone call, which wasn't a transcript, by the way, it was just someone's opinion, it was someone's perception of that conversation between Trump and Zelensky. And they released it, but they framed it as if it was something different. And that's exactly what you'll see. I mean, look at this Adam Kinzinger post. He reposts this account that says, Witkoff attempts to coach the Kremlin on how to more easily coerce the president. That's their headline. That's how they're describing this. But you just listened to the transcript. You just read it. Is that what happened? Is that an accurate representation of this phone call? No, of course not. Of course not. And you don't have to be a mainstream media journalist to see that. You can read it for yourself. But this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to present the Trump administration as it's the same old allegation. Russia. Putin is Putin's controlling Trump. It's You know, it's the Trump administration, the people around him trying to convince Putin how to better control Trump to get the outcome that he wants. Why? So that if the Democrats, God forbid, take back the House and the Senate in 2026, which we have a year, and we better work hard to make sure that doesn't happen, so that they can have an impeachment all teed up. But an impeachment based on what? Based on phony allegations. Maybe this time, I hope this time, thanks to the fact that the new media, especially the new media on the right, has broken the monopoly of the mainstream media. You can actually have access to the truth, to accurate information. It's not just entirely gatekeeping from the mainstream media that determines what you hear or what you don't hear. Thanks to Elon Musk and X, you can always find the truth on X because there's not censorship anymore. Maybe this playbook won't be effective this time because we not only recognize what it is, we are not as quick to believe anymore as Americans what any of our elected officials, what our government, what our media tells us anymore. We now question what we hear. And when you analyze this yourself and don't just take the word of the mainstream media and elected representatives or fools like neocons like Adam Kinzinger, you'll see for yourself there's nothing remotely scandalous about that readout of that phone call. It's not at all what the mainstream media is portraying it to be. And it's exactly what Jack Posobiec predicted would happen on this show yesterday. It's exactly in line with the playbook of how the left, who cannot resign themselves to the fact that the majority of the American people voted for Donald Trump because we want him to be our president, they cannot resign themselves to that. And they are, by hook or by crook, trying, and they will continue to try to take him out. Only this time, we're not going to let them.